Today's session. Today, our presentation is called Let Them Climb, and it is about the power of outdoor and risky play. My name is Erin Sheehan. I am the behavior advisor, and let's get started here. Oh, goodness, now I'm not going to work. There we go. Okay, so first we're going to talk about why we need to get outside. So the benefits of being outside in nature, why outdoor play is so crucial. And we're going to touch on risky play. And then we're going to wrap it up with some practical ways to encourage more of it at home, even in a busy, screen-filled, and sometimes chilly Canadian world. Okay, so why outside? But it's cold outside, or it's too hot outside, or it's windy, or it's mosquito season, or it's just, too fresh and you're just not into it. So nature meets every developmental need a young child has. So it supports motor skills, language, creativity, emotional regulation, social development, all at once, and with zero cost. Kids don't need instructions to play outside. The environment just naturally invites curiosity and imagination. Now, that's not to say that, if you haven't spent a lot of time outside or are new to this exploratory world, that they may not ask you constantly, well, what do I do? I'm bored. But the more time you spend in it, the easier that'll get. And we'll talk about that a little bit more too. So research shows that time in green space lowers stress and improves attention, even in young children. And we'll talk about that a little bit more on our next slide as well. So kind of some key factors here into our reduction in outside time. So we used to spend a lot more time outside in general, and from your own childhood to now. And when you look back at your parents' childhood, we've just been kind of decreasing our amount of time outside. So on average, children, I think the study was done in the States, but on average, kids are accessing about 1,200 hours of screens per year. So that's just over 3 hours a day, which at first sounds like a lot. And you may think, oh, there's no way my kid does. But when you actually add up all that little time, it's pretty easy to get to that 3-hour mark without even really realizing it. Screens are really prevalent in our lives. The other big factor with this is scheduling. Our kids are way more scheduled than generations past. A lot of kind of our culture is very achievement-based. So we tend as a society to put enormous pressure with heavily orchestrated schedules on extracurricular activities, which are kind of designed to help kids succeed in life. But it leaves little free time for our kids to be kids. Essentially, kids are just too busy to have time to play creatively and relax, between dance and hockey and soccer and, running club and all these extracurriculars. And even the ones that are outside and nature-based, they're still very structured. And so we're lacking that time for creativity and free play and those sorts of things, which, as you can see, is the point under it, is that structured piece, that deletion of free play. And that's where a lot of creativity and regulation and problem solving comes from. Another thing that comes up a lot is safety and fear parenting, and that idea that we really need to be keeping our kids safe, and kind of this idea that the world is a more dangerous place than it used to be when we were kids. Then there's also that shift to urban living. Generations ago, there weren't that many people living in cities or heavily populated areas, whereas now the vast majority of our population does. So even just access to that outside free play. I'm very lucky we live on a farm, so my kids are outside quite often. And a lot of times I kick them out and they go out and play on their own out in the yard, whereas a lot of people in maybe a more urban setting aren't comfortable doing that or don't have the access to that space either. And then for us, a big part is that climate. Even This is clearly something I'm passionate about, and we struggled a lot this winter to get outside because after Christmas it was super, super cold. And then in the summer it's hot, and I mentioned mosquito season. So there's no single culprit. It's a mix of kind of all of these things that just make less room for unstructured outdoor play. So some key benefits to playing outside. It's natural. We are genetically attuned to be part of the natural world. We're genetically attuned to pay attention to other kinds of life. And this means less work for our brains. So doing similar activities inside versus outside, it's actually less cognitive effort for us to do them outside. Nature triggers relaxation responses in the brain, which is the opposite of a stress response. There's decrease in blood pressure, cortisol output, heightened immunity, decrease in muscle tension, and increase in alertness. So when we're outside, the blood flow to our brain actually increases by about 25%. So a regular relaxation response helps the body be less vulnerable to the stress response. Even when we're indoors, those effects last. It's interest-based, so it's child-led. There's so much exploring and things that we can do when we're outside, and it leads itself really nicely to just some natural child-led learning. When children lead their own play, they regulate it better and they actually stay engaged longer. Now, there's lots of studies that show it takes kids about 45 minutes to get fully immersed in their full play schema. So at first they might be coming and nagging, or they're bored, or they're not sure what to do. But if we let that flourish in that 45 minutes, all of a sudden they'll get really engaged in something. So a couple springs ago, my son and my nephew, we were playing outside, and my nephew really didn't want to go outside, but I kind of forced them to. And they were outside playing, and they were bored, and they were whining to go in. And I was reading my book, and then I came back to check. They were just around the corner off the deck, and they'd been quiet for a while. So I went to check on them, and they had found a whole pile of bricks in the bush that had been taken apart. Something had been taken apart at one point, and they were stacked over there. And they had created a fully functioning like pizza oven, basically. And they built it on sand. So after a while, they asked if we could light it and try it out. And I thought, well, sure. So we lit it and we tried it out. And I pulled out our camping griddle and we put it on top and we made pancakes. And they thought that was just the best thing ever. And they still talk about that in the pizza oven that they randomly designed and made. And they spent probably a good 2 hours working on it. And that's where that child-led piece comes. And even that whole body, right? That was a really great cognitive exercise. There was lots of great teamwork, collaboration, and problem solving. It was really incredible to see. I didn't really touch on risk yet, so we're going to go back to risk here. So there is some risk involved in natural play, and we'll talk a little bit more about risky play in a minute here. But risky play actually helps kids be safer in the long run. So it helps them learn their limits. So they actually end up having less injuries, those kiddos who engage in risky play, versus the kids who don't. They're more sure on their feet. They've got better balance. They understand how their body works in space. Okay, we talked a little bit about whole body. It's just got really great benefits overall. Stress relief, we talked about that relaxation response. We're built for it. Outdoor play is encoded into human development. It is really therapeutic. Being outside helps kids and adults unwind and reset. And then there's that resiliency piece. We've got the opportunity for some misadventure and learning flexibility. And, we set out with a plan, but this didn't work. Or, we were really determined we were going to go find some earthworms, and we started digging, and you know what, the ground's too cold. We couldn't find any earthworms. But then on the way, we noticed this really cool fuzzy thing. We weren't sure what it was. So if you're interested in doing some outside exploring, there's some pretty cool plant identification apps that you can download. One of them is called Seek. And so you could, scan the plant. Oh, you learn it's a trembling aspen, and then we can kind of explore from there. And so there's some flexibility and some kind of learning from misadventures or problem solving of, our boot got stuck in the mud, and now how do we get it out, and all those pieces. So there's two simple truths when it comes to outside play. We feel better and we learn better. So we talked about that relaxation response, mood improvement, and the natural environment. So there's been studies done that seniors living next to green spaces, so in a seniors facility that is next to a green space, the seniors live longer. Hospital patients heal faster if they have a view of nature outside their room, even if it's just a tree. Nature scenes can relieve stress in examination students, even if it's not actually outside. They've replicated the same, auditorium style test taking, but some of them had kind of a scene put up on the wall or through the projector that was of a nature scene. And those students had lower stress levels. And then when we look at that, we learn better. Our memory is improved, so is our focus and attention. So children with ADHD improve in behavior and mood after outdoor activities. There was one study where they did a study break before a math class for an elementary group, and they had 3 groups. One group took their break in class, one group went and ran in the hallway, and the other group went outside. The group that went outside, oh my gosh, sorry. The group that went outside did better on concentration and their test scores. Studies showed drastically improved cognitive skills after outdoor play. So nature helps regulate our mood and stress. Kids who play outside regularly show more focus, better memory, and stronger attention. It's powerful support for kids with emotional or behavior regulation difficulties. And this is even true after short bursts of time outdoors. Think like 20 minutes. It doesn't have to be hours a day. Okay, now we're going to get into risky play. So I've got the tagline here that risky play is smart play. Risky play can be anything from climbing, jumping, running, rough and tumble, that wrestling, exploring solo with supervision. I'm not saying you just send your kid off to Safeway on their own, but if you've got a little green space and you can kind of see it from your window, or depending on the age of your kiddo, mine are a little bit older now. So they, like I said, we live on a farm, so they're allowed to explore the property on their own. Usually they have a walkie-talkie with them. So they've got a walkie-talkie. I've got one back in the yard, and they can go off out of eyesight, but they've got to check in, and I know that they're okay. And if I wanted to, I could pull out some binoculars and probably find them. And using loose parts and tools. So using things that they find around, little nature bits and stuff, to build and create. So risky play isn't unsafe. It's developmentally necessary. When kids climb, balance, or race, they learn to assess danger and build confidence. So they'll learn how to assess a situation and learn if it's something that they can do, or how to get themselves out of it if they get to a point where they can't do it. So there's a study that found that kids who are engaged in risky play are more confident, they're better problem solvers, and they're less likely to get seriously injured later. And yes, scraped knees happen and tears, but so does growth. And that's how we get that really great growth and development. I think in the next slide, hold on, I'm just going to check. I think I talk about, okay. I do have a video to watch, but I do want to mention there is an occupational therapist named Angela Hanscom, and she talks a lot about noticing in her practice this huge shift in kids, that now our kids are clumsier than they used to be, and they're more accident prone, and they seem to, bump into walls and stuff. And in her research, she's attributed a lot of this to the lack of this outdoor risky play. So they don't have the body awareness that they used to in previous generations. So we're going to watch this video. As you watch it, notice how kids are testing limits and that they're tuning into their bodies, they're solving problems and regulating their emotions, all while having fun. So this is self-regulation in real time. I'll see if I can get this to play.
When kids play tag on ice,
they're gonna get hurt, they're gonna get some bumps and scrapes and scratches along the way, but they grow and they learn.
The Canadian Pediatric Society agrees, saying to counter rising obesity, anxiety, and behavioral issues, kids need to get outside and do things that might leave a bruise.
There is a balance between allowing kids to get out there, be autonomous, try new things, challenge themselves, and we know that there will be a risk of injury.
The Canadian Pediatric Society is now encouraging things like playing at heights, climbing trees and ropes or jumping, fast play, sliding down hills, biking and running, or play involving sharp tools with supervision. The list even includes play fighting and just letting kids explore the world. But there are limits.
Well, this isn't about letting a child run into a busy street or play unsupervised near rough water. Those are hazards.
She notes risky play does not mean ignoring evidence-based safety measures either, like bike helmets and life jackets. Still, some parents and grandparents will say it's just not safe out there.
And that's a common perception that the world is less safe than it was when we were kids. But in fact, if you look at the injury statistics, it's actually never been a safer time to be a child than it is right now.
Experts say parents can also reframe how they talk to kids about risk. Instead of repeating, "be careful," which can raise fears, ask kids if they feel comfortable or "what's your plan?"
And we're finding new research that's even more exciting around the mental health benefits of risky play, building self-confidence and resilience, and also managing of symptoms of anxiety.
This isn't a move away from safety, experts say, but a shift towards keeping kids as safe as necessary. Christine Birak, CBC News, Toronto.
Okay, so in that video, it talks about a lot of the things that Angela Hanscom talks about as well. So if you're interested, she has a book that is called Balanced and Barefoot, and it's how unrestricted outdoor play makes for strong, competent, and capable children. And so one of the things that she talks about too is building that resiliency for even messy and dirty fingers, which I can attest to working in pre-K classrooms. A lot of kids now come in and they can't handle that. Whereas I can usually tell which are the farm kids that are the ones rolling around in the mud and stuff because it doesn't faze them. And so one of the other things she talks about too, or one of her kind of key areas she talks about, is vestibular sense. And so vestibular sense is activated when the fluids in our inner ears move around and they stimulate the hair cells. And the vestibular sense is kind of the key to all of our other senses. It helps children know where their body is in space. It supports our eye muscles to work as a team, to develop good visual skills, and it helps kids pay attention. Now, how we activate our vestibular sense is basically by getting out of the upright. So that is on swings, and it's spinning, and it's rolling, and it's, a kiddo who tips on their chair a lot. They're activating that vestibular sense. And so kids need that for their development, and it's very regulating, and it really helps with that development in those other key areas. And outside play just inherently activates a whole lot of vestibular sense. Okay, so some of the things that you might see at home if you get outside a little bit more and you start engaging in some risky play. Fewer meltdowns, smoother transitions, better sleep, and more independence and confidence. And that's building that grit and resiliency. I'm not saying this is going to work right away. This isn't we went outside one time and now everything is fixed. This is making it a household habit, a family culture and philosophy. So outdoor play often leads to fewer power struggles and more self-direction. Daylight exposure helps regulate circadian rhythms. So that's where sleep comes in. We intuitively know that fresh air helps us sleep better. But one of those kind of key factors is getting natural sunlight to our eyes prior to noon. So that morning sunlight, if we get morning sunlight in our eyes, it really triggers a bunch of different things in our body that help benefit our sleep. So kids tend to fall asleep faster and sleep more deeply if they're outside regularly. And when they're leading play outside, they become more confident in other parts of their life too. They learn that resiliency, they learn that grit, they learn to keep going in a way that a lot of other spaces can't teach kids, or that you can't teach kids kind of on their own. Okay, so let's go. Step 3, how do we make this doable? Start where you're at. It doesn't have to be fancy. Routine helps a lot, and small chunks of time can have a big impact. Like I said, this doesn't mean all of a sudden you've decided as a family that, okay, you know what, we're cutting all screens and now we're outside for 2 hours a day. That may not work for your family. If you're already outside quite a bit and you've limited screen time quite a bit, that might be doable for you. Whereas if you do have a lot of screen time and we're not outside a whole lot, that's a big jump. So baby steps. It doesn't mean long hikes or camping trips. It can be 10 minutes in the yard or stomping in puddles. Maybe you park a little bit farther from school and you walk a little bit further, or at the end of the day, when you get home, you hop out of the car, you don't go straight in the house. Maybe you put the backpacks on the step and you play in the yard a little bit. Simple routines, like, after snack, we go outside, make it easier, or after supper or before supper, depending on the age of your children and the level of supervision needed. It might be, okay, while I'm making supper, you guys play for half an hour in the backyard where I can see you. And you will benefit from this too. Time outside is good for adults' stress, mood, and energy. And I know sometimes it's the last thing we feel like doing. I get that. I'm a parent myself, and there are times when I really don't want to, but I never end up regretting it. So even last night is a good example. We'd gotten home from work and school. I was making supper. We ate supper quick, and then my daughter has dance. But we actually finished early for supper. We had about half an hour till we had to leave for dance. And my daughter said, "Oh, I'm supposed to bring something to school that shows a sign of spring." Okay, well, let's go in the yard and we'll see if any of the trees have a bud on them or anything. And so we were out kind of walking in the yard, and there wasn't much, but I could see just down our road that there's a clump of some trembling aspens that I could see, and I knew that they would have their fuzz on them. So we had the dog and we all go tromping down the driveway, and we're down the road and collecting our things. And it was funny because I didn't really want to go. And then while we were there, I was seeing the kids playing, and the dog is running in the field having the greatest time. And the kids had been kind of arguing and stuff. And all of a sudden they weren't really fighting with each other anymore. And they were finding stuff, and they were showing each other, and they were calling each other over to look at it. And then, they were kind of debating, which branch should I take to school? And, oh, I really like that one. There's some small ones. I don't really want to take those to school, but maybe could we come back tomorrow and we can cut those ones and I can put them in my room. And then, we noticed the dugout just down a little bit further looked different. We could see some things that looked different than they did in the winter. And so we were exploring that. And, it was supposed to be a quick 5-minute trip out to the Caragana bush to see if we could find a leaf. Ended up being this half an hour, really lovely after supper quality time together. And then I noticed when I came back in, I felt a lot better. And I'm sure you can speak to that too. If you ever manage to, make it out for a quick walk by yourself, even if you're listening to an audiobook or you're just having your coffee, whatever, you always feel better after. Okay, so what counts as outside time? Anything. Anything counts as outside time. Backyard play, taking a snack outside, having a meal outside. If you've got a deck or a porch or whatever, and you can throw some chairs out and eat outside. My kids love eating outside. That's kind of how we started. Was, we started one summer and it was nice out, so we'd have a barbecue and then eat outside, and or have a fire pit and cook outside together. Followed your child's lead. Go for walks and bike rides and things like that. If we need a little more structure, yard work, reading outside. That was a big one that started for my daughter. She was not big on the outside. That's where my first slide came from, where it said, why outside? Because it's too hot, too buggy, too fresh, too cold, any of the things. That was why she didn't want to go. But she loves reading. So we would take our books outside and we'd read a couple stories on the deck, and that was enough for her. But it still got us outside. It kind of opened that door. And exploring is kind of the biggest one. Follow your child's lead. If they're poking at ants or jumping off a log, whatever it is, they're engaging in rich learning. They don't need fancy gear or materials or a prepared plan, just time and space, really. So kind of a sample plan of what you could do. There's this book. It's called The Listening Walk. I've come into some of the pre-K classrooms and I've done this with the classrooms. So we've read the book. You can get it from the library. I think you can even find it read aloud on YouTube. And the whole premise is that this girl and her dad and their dog are going to go for a walk. And they talk about all the sounds that they hear on their walk. And so they hear, a ball bouncing and people's shoes and the dog, and they hear all sorts of sounds. So typically when I do this with a classroom, I'll read the book with all the kiddos, and then we'll make guesses. So I'll say, we're going to go for a walk. And before we go, let's take a guess. What do you think we're going to hear? And we can kind of gamify it. We can make it like a bingo game. So we could make a bingo card if we wanted to. We could write it down, or we could just make some guesses. With one class, we took paper plates. Then we kind of drew them all on a paper plate and cut them out into little tabs. And if we found the noise, we'd fold the tab down and did it kind of like bingo. Whoever had their tabs folded down first won. Really doesn't matter. Whatever is going to get your kid engaged in it. And then we went outside and we went for a walk. And this is where I say we wing it, because with one class, they were really intent on having it be a bingo game. Another class didn't really care. They were just kind of open to sit around and listen. And we did a walk, and then we ended up climbing trees and climbing over logs and doing all sorts of stuff. Another class really just wanted to sit in the grass and just kind of listen. And then, we could hear some birds and some squirrels, and we were kind of identifying what we were hearing. So there's lots of different ways that it can kind of go if you're willing to follow your child's lead and just kind of roll with it. See where it takes you. There's lots of flexibility in that. And so you can start out with something kind of structured if it's a little bit intimidating to just kind of jump in, or you can really just start making an effort to just be in nature. I don't know that I've ever really met a kid who doesn't find something in the outdoors that they end up enjoying, whether it's playing sink or float. Take a tub of water in a Tupperware container outside and have them find different things and see if it sinks or floats. And that sounds like it would be a really simple activity. The same thing, I did that in a few classrooms, and I had one class that took an hour and a half doing that. They were just fascinated by it. They found every different variation of grass blade and pine cone and stick that they could have to test out. And, we ended up talking about buoyancy and doing all sorts of really interesting things based on the questions that the kids were asking and where their interests were leading. So it's a really fascinating thing when we go outside with kids, where their interests take us. And if we're willing to be open to it and just kind of go with it, it's really cool what doors can open up. Okay, so our two kind of key takeaways. Start small, and it's worth it. So start small. You don't need to do it all, right? We don't need to be going into more added pressure. This is not about adding pressure. It's about letting go. It's about saying yes to a little more mud in your house, a little more height on your trees, a little more mess, and a little more motion. It is letting your child lead and watch what they're capable of. Try really hard not to say, be careful. It can be really tricky. But like that video said, be careful really isn't necessarily helpful, and it just leads to a little bit more fear. Instead of, be careful. If they're climbing on something, say, do you have a good grip on that? You can teach your kids safety things like 3 points of contact when they're climbing. Teach them those things, but in a way that's supportive to their growth, not just in a way that's going to put fear on them, and fear on yourself, right? It's a way that we can let go a little bit. So we tend to see, bumps and bruises as something to avoid, but in the world of child development, they are signs that a child is exploring and learning. I remember when my kids were little and I would take them in for their checkups with the doctor. And I remember saying to the doctor, like, oh man, you're like, I promise everything's fine. Like, my kids were covered in bruises. And she kind of laughed and she said, I'm actually more worried about the kids who come in with no bruises and scrapes. Because when we have bruises and scrapes, it shows that we're exploring, right? We're climbing, we're running, we're falling, and we're doing stuff. If our kids have no bruises and scrapes, chances are we're not leading a very active exploratory sort of life that we're doing here. So a scraped knee might mean that they climbed higher than before. And maybe it meant they ran faster than they've ever run. It might mean that they tried something new. And in doing that, they learn to assess their risks. They learn to test their limits and bounce back when things don't go perfectly. So it's building resilience, not just physically, but emotionally and mentally as well. So the key is that they're doing this in a supported, safe environment when you're nearby, cheering them on, not just shutting them down. Kids are going to seek this out naturally. So if we're kind of there hovering, always shutting things out, they might try some risky play whenever they can, when it's maybe not supervised or not safe for them to do it, or not an appropriate environment for them to do it. Whereas, if we're there coaching them through it, teaching them those safety things like wearing helmets and life jackets, and, if we're in the water, maybe it's a wetsuit because it's cold, and teaching them to dress properly for the elements, teaching them 3 points of contact when we're climbing, teaching them those safety pieces, but still allowing them to engage in that risk actually makes them safer in the long run. And so that's where we come to, it's worth it. They grow in so many ways that they're supposed to, from being outside and engaging in that risky play. Okay, so for our next steps, on the pre-K parent portal, I have a list of resources that includes books, websites, all sorts of things like that. If you want to get started, there's a bunch of accounts online through various social media platforms that promote outdoor play with kids. They speak to the benefits of it, and have simple ideas to get you outside. So some of them are, there's a 1,000 hours outside challenge. And the whole idea of that is that you're getting outside for 1,000 hours in a year, which is, if you'll remember from our beginning of our slide, is still less than the screen time hours that children on average are accessing per year. So that is a kind of a fun one that you can do with your family. They've got an app that there's a tracker on. They've got printable coloring sheets that kids can track their own hours. And it's a pretty positive, supportive environment in that the challenge isn't necessarily to make it to 1,000 hours, but to try. And the founder of that often says, even if you fail, you win. Because even if you only get 200 hours outside, that's still 200 hours that you might not have gotten had you not done the challenge. So that's a really great place to start. Or there's another account called Run Wild, My Child, and they have lots of really great ideas. They put out seasonal ideas. They do some fun kind of spring bingo and things to try to get you out and about. Lots of different ideas. There's a bunch of nature coalitions. There's all sorts of things that you can find online that can give you some ideas to get you going. And then as well, I've got on the pre-K parent portal a menu of kind of 30-minute outdoor activities to get you started. So just some ideas, things that you can do that'll take you 30 minutes. Could be less, could be more. Let your child lead and just kind of go with it. And as I like to say, wing it and see what happens. You can always contact me. I'm happy to speak with you more. If you forget my name and you don't want to come back to the slide, ask your teacher. They probably know who I am. They may have had me in their class doing some of this. And the big thing is get outside, have fun, give it a go, see what happens. So thank you for joining me today. If you have any questions about this, always feel free to reach out. And I hope you get outside and have some fun.